when I messaged Elemy this morning, I mentioned to her that there were a few things that I wanted to try to get out of this, like, kind of impromptu, shorter chat between us. And the first one was just to ask Elemy to share some of her experiences working with Syngapians, especially when it comes to the fact that they have a lot of medical comorbidities. And that really impacts their behavior. And I know that some of the clients that she's worked with, it seems like my kiddo's on a similar kind of medical trajectory. So yeah, Elemy, like I would really love if you could just share some of like the big takeaways that you've had with that in your clients.
Mm-hmm. I will just also disclaimer, I will not say my client's name either. However, I have full permission and everything from the parents to share. Part of the reason why we're here is because they want to help their community as well. So it will be very obvious for a lot of people who end up watching this recording. So just so everyone knows, I have full permission from the parents to share all of these. Yes, I agree with Sydney that in that regard, we do have a lot of similarities on medical comorbidities, and the complexity that comes with that is really, really, really important in how we approach our treatment. One of the biggest things that I have found is that I have had to really customize their treatment just to an unbelievable amount. Like, we know we have to do individualization of treatment, but with these kiddos, I have to take into consideration absolutely everything. I know I asked you, Sydney, if we are taking data for you guys on how is sleep, constipation, how is the mood today, literally we take data from the moment, what time exactly did we go to sleep, what time do we wake up, how many times do we wake up in the night, how many ounces of liquid we've taken in, how many times we've gone to the bathroom, what does the consistency look like, all of that. And we take on it daily so that by the time our RBT or myself, which I do a lot of the direct with them, part because I think that the complexity requires a higher level of expertise in order for you to make in the moment assessments that require you to change your intervention. But in the morning, what we do is just take that data and we adjust our treatment based on that data. I have kind of like different behavior plans based on those setting events alone. And we actually take it so into consideration that we have written protocols for every different variation of a setting event like situation. Medications, the parent of my kiddo literally calls me a pharmacist because I know everything about those medications. I know what the half-life is, what are the counter interactions with it, side effects, what could possibly be going on. I've looked at single case study scenarios of like the 0.0001% probability of them getting this one particular side effect, because all of that really, really, really affects their behavior. They're so sensitive with their body. A lot of what we're dealing with behavior-wise is automatic. That can come across like denied access, attention, access, whatever, all of that. But really with them, I feel like we have not only 4 functions, we have like 17 of them, and they change on the second. So you have to change your intervention based on what you're seeing. That's 1. And 2, they happen simultaneously. So what Greg Kenley would call a synthesized contingency. It's not only one thing, it's multiple at once. So it is very important that we have whatever staff is working with them have the ability and are trained on being able to identify those functions right away. Very, very important. The complexity is just mind-blowing. It all works out. You have to take in consideration absolutely everything. Ideally, and I'm sure from what it sounds like, you guys are very collaborative, but I consistently have meetings with my client's neurologist, with his psychiatrist, with his OT, speech, school. We are all in constant, like, there are emails back and forth going on because of that, because it plays a significant role. Medication changes, I know you guys just recently went through a few. I'm sure it's playing the majority of the role on all of the things that you guys are seeing. He's basically, we're not, the social emotional ability for them to regulate their body is not there. And cognitively, sometimes, particularly for a little one like him, they're not there to understand how they need to regulate and what they need to regulate. And so with that, we're left with an automatic, basically, behavior, because we think that he's tantruming because he doesn't have access to the elevator. But really what is happening is that his body's inability to regulate, you have a protein that is like firing away his brain. He has laser focus on whatever it is. And what it is his body inability to reach homeostasis. And we can help with that. There is no way that behavioral treatment, like, I've tried everything under the sun. Deep breaths, like the typical what we would teach, right? The replacement behavior for that would be them learning the ability to regulate, but this is biological. Like, this is something that they're not able to do because of that excitatory protein. So we really have to find really creative ways to turn around. Proactiveness is huge, 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 huge. If you can avoid all reactive strategies, that's probably our best bet. Is it possible? No, but we can absolutely try. And that has been probably the greatest results I've gotten when I've gotten very systematic on my protocol. I'm very to the T on my proactive strategies. And again, the ability to change back and forth between one or another is very, very, very important. I cannot emphasize, probably it's one of the, if there's anything in this whole thing that we can get out of, is taking into consideration those medical complexities, getting really fluent with them us as providers. I think that's very, very good. I have a kind of like a bundle of Syngap 101 articles and stuff that I've found very helpful to help me understand what I'm working with. I can share that as well, but really just getting really fluent with that. And we as behavior analysts know that setting events do take a role. In my experience, what I have not seen in our practice is that we actually take that into consideration in the moment for treatment, right? We have one behavior plan that we follow, and that's that. And so when things change, which they do rapidly in Syngap, a lot of the ineffectiveness, I think, come from that inability to change our protocol when we need to. So really, really, really taking those setting events into consideration and applying them in the practical setting is what has worked for me and how I've approached my entire treatment. I, of course, stand by the principles, do everything the same, but really I don't. I just really try the different ways, and I follow a lot of Greg Canley's work. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them, but he's helped me on his readings and his trainings and all of that a lot, because it is really an innovative way of doing ABA, as opposed to the traditional, like in the 70s, Cooper. Like, we are really moving towards a more progressive ABA, and that is what I have been trying to implement and what has worked for me. And that's as far as complexities, if that helps a little. If you have any questions on that, Sydney, anything you'd like to add?
I was thinking maybe you could speak a little bit specifically about seizures and constipation. Definitely the med changes are huge for us, and you've touched on that, which is great, but those are Emmett's two big ones, I think. And I'm just curious, like, what do you see in your clients that might be applicable to us as well?
Well, I'll tell you what I see in my, well, seizures forget it. Like when they're, first of all, yeah, great point, Sydney, seizures. Getting fluent on catching seizures with a naked eye when I don't know what type of seizures he has, but if he, all of them, yeah.
All of them.
If there are absent seizures, myclonia, or any of those, I would highly recommend, and I can also share some of those, that we put our staff through identifying those, because they are in the split, literally a blink of an eye. You can look away to your iPad and it happened. And also, a lot of, which I'm probably sure that is the same for your client. A lot of these are not classified as seizures, they're classified as epileptiform discharges, that I find okay, because that's what the medical providers tell us. But for us, when your brain is firing abnormally, as it relates to our learning or training or ability to have, ultimately what we have for what we want for a kid is to have the availability for them to learn, right? We want them on a stage in which they're able to learn. I find it extremely disturbing that epileptiform discharges, as they're classified, are supposed to not affect the kid, and they're not classified as seizures, and there's nothing we can do about it. For us, that's not true. That's not true, because the kid is experiencing an electrical discharge that inevitably shows that they're not able to learn. I understand from the medical perspective that we're not able to medicate that, because then you're balancing a sedation kid with like a lot of medication. Like, it is a balance, and I understand that. But we as providers that are directly working with the kid, that has a significant impact. And when we notice that those seizures are happening, we either, depending on the severity, the frequency, how much we see, well, first, behaviorally, the first thing we see is increased irritability, decreased tolerability. Literally anything you deny access to is a behavior. Anything you like, it doesn't go the way they want it, how they want it, the way it is at the moment that they want it, behavior. Whereas other times you see them be like, so tolerable, so patient, so everything, and you're like, what in the world is going on? It is very likely not like the kid, you know, not the person, not his mood, not his anything. I just think, have you guys ever been like so busy, you have a report to write, you have a note, you have like all these parents talking to you, your brain literally feels fried. You just get home and you're like, oh my God. I feel like that's literally how they feel all the time, 24/7, 365 days a week. And even the times, this is an important part too, even, which is also a little hard for parents to remind themselves of, that even good times, excited times, happy times, too much of that is also not beneficial, particularly for Syngap. If I'm sure you guys, or maybe not, have talked about what Syngap is, but Syngap basically, the way I picture in my head, is just literally constant firing in the brain, because the protein can't stop that. It doesn't have enough of it to stop that excitability in the brain. So even excited times get really too excited. And then emotionally, if you look at what that looks like in physiologically in the brain, your heart rate, excited and anger are the same. It's rapid heartbeat, is increased neurological firing. You feel just like amped, whether you're excited or angry. So a lot of the times, excitability turns into anger, and it turns into a behavior. You have to watch very, very, very carefully when your kid, what is his threshold? Where does it turn into something else? So it's just really about creating an environment that protects their brain, that protects their sensory input. that's as far as seizures. When there is seizures, we automatically know what we do. We decrease our demands. We go into a building rapport state, and as much as we can medically, we try to provide some stability, whether it is a supplement that will like help them calm down or something like that, or we start modifying the environment. We close the shades, we remove any patterns, because all patterns like what's a pattern? Like any graphic, like gridded pixels, anything, like the sweaters that we wear, we have to wear all flat colors, like just black, white, blue, because any sweater, any pattern could trigger in that state any seizures. And once they're triggered, they cluster. So it may take time to trigger it, but once they're triggered, they just continue to happen. So we start doing that. What we have done too is we've learned that there's a lot of different types. It can be sound, it can be light, it can be a lot, but the majority of the input that triggers seizures is actually visual, whether it is sound and visual or just the lights or whatever it is. The majority of the input that goes through our brain is through our visual field. So what we have done is we have trained our kiddos to wear an eye mask. And so when we are seeing seizures, what we do is like, okay, it's time to relax. Let's put our eye mask on. And we started with shaping, literally with like not even being able to touch the thing. And now we just wear it for like at least 30 seconds. And at least that interrupts the pattern. So we do things like that. Like how can we can't stop them. We can medicate them more. And unfortunately, because it's all internal, a lot of negative pairing happens, and we end up suffering the most in our relationships with them. But when you build a trusting relationship with them, they'll at least allow you in that moment to help them, and they come out, interestingly enough, and understand like, oh, I make the connection eventually that sorry Siri they eventually make the connection that's what is happening, and they let you help them in that way. A lot of negative pairing. You have to be really careful with your affect, because it's all in the brain. So literally a seizure can happen and he can straight be looking at you and you're the cause of that seizure. And if that happens, a behavior will come out of nowhere and you're like, what? This is a lot. I don't know if you've heard or Sydney has told you about the Syngap snap or behaviors coming out of nowhere. We don't know. A lot of the times they are very unexpected, but as a good behavior analyst, 99% of the time, they're not. We just have to dig deeper. What happened? What is it? Like, yeah, it may be something that we have no control over. It's not the typical, like, it's for access, it's for this, it's for that. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the behaviors do not happen for no reason, no matter what. There may be an internal reason. There may be a reason that we don't know about. We have to find it. And let's try our hardest to find it, because when we're able to find those, like, for example, I know that sometimes seizures are triggered by my client's dog barking because she's so loud. So she reaches like a decibel level that triggers that in his brain. And now we know we have to keep that dog shut, you know? So things like that. Constipation is probably, other than sleep, one of the most important and worst sources of behaviors for in my experience for my Syngapians, because what a terrible time to be constipated all the time. Like, it makes sense. Even if TMI, I got constipated one day and I'm like, I'm out. What is this? You know? So it's a lot of pain. It's not only the constipation, I've learned too, it's the straining, it's negative pairing from previous constipation experiences and having to push to get it out. That's very painful. And pain, as we know, gets really, really, really ingrained in our brain. So sometimes they don't even want to go to the bathroom. They want to avoid it at all costs. For the longest time, prior to me starting to work with my kiddo, we would tell him to go to the bathroom. First of all, he was in pull-ups. He's no longer, which is great, and he's telling us when he needs to go. But a lot of the barrier with him being able to go to the bathroom was the fact that nobody was paying attention to the fact that it hurt to go to the bathroom. So he didn't want to. He didn't want to push. So he will have accidents whenever he just couldn't contain it. So prior to that, we would literally have 2-hour drops when told to go to the bathroom. 2 hours. He would just he would rather lay on the hard wood floor and do absolutely nothing, all reinforcement taken away, than go to the bathroom. That's a pretty high aversion to me. What is happening for you to find that more reinforcing than literally anything else under the sun that we can provide you with? Chips, fun, reinforcement. We'll take you to SeaWorld. We'll take you anywhere. Just go to the bathroom. Nope, flat no. So that's very, very important. That is also something that I had to collaborate on with the mom and with medical, because a lot of the seizure medication cause constipation. And not only the constipation, it's just they slow the system down, the entire system. So if you think oxygen intake, that breaks down your enzymes, that goes down, all of that stuff plays a role. So it just slows down your cells, your systems, which just what requires processing time. We need to implement methods in our behavior treatment to allow processing time for all of those things and account for them. So I don't know where you're at with that, Sydney, but definitely trying different, and I know you're on it already, but I did not let my mom stop her trial and error, and it took us solid 2 years until we were able to find a combo that allowed him to poop daily. Ultimately, we need to poop daily. Otherwise, those constipation issues are not going to go away. His bowels get strained. It doesn't look pretty for them. It's painful. And ultimately, you have behaviors. That's the bottom line. If you don't get rid of the constipation, you're going to have behaviors. So I 100% recommend that you guys go through that process. And in the process, in the behavior part, just support with that. If he's constipated, we got to change our treatment. We have to put in the supports. We have to allow processing time. We have to decrease our demand. We have to go into rapport building. It has to be a constant change based on those medical needs.
You have really accurately described my life. So I'm so glad that we're doing this. I wanted to say too, because Melissa and Erica haven't spent time with Emmett yet, what Elemy is saying about the fact that you guys will just, even on the first day, I'm sure, see behaviors that you're just like, why? Because I think that all the time is there's still so much stuff that I don't understand why it causes behaviors, but there are definitely patterns of things going on in his environment or whatever that I know will lead to behavior. Even if I don't know exactly why those things would cause a behavior, I know that they will lead to it. And I think that's part of why ABA has been so helpful to us, is because you have to kind of get out of your own mindset of trying to understand why something's happening, even though that is nice when you do discover why, and maybe take a step back and at least try to identify the patterns or the scenarios that you know are going to lead to behaviors, even if you don't understand exactly what is going on in his brain that would make that such a tricky situation. Elemy, I wanted to ask you, So we do chart a few things every day that I have specifically that his ABAT looks at. So I think it's like constipation, if there's any med changes, how did he sleep, what was his mood like? I think that's, and how are his seizures? On a very kind of like general level, I answer all of those questions before each session for her. But I take a lot more detailed notes on a separate page that I don't actually give to ABA that is for his ketogenic team. So it's like, what's the pH of his urine? You know, how many times did he stool? How many seizures would you estimate of each of the types? How did he eat? Like it's a lot more categories and it's a little more in depth. I'm wondering if that's more like the kind of charting that you're getting from your clients that's just really specific, and how often do you do that?
Yes, we have 4 or 5 pages of daily data that I just print, bring to the family, and the family fills it out daily. And we come in and we read it, and based on that, or kiddo is not with a like ketogenetic team. So I created all of those sheets for them, and I literally use them for my own, for ABA purpose. That's it, it goes to show kind of like crazy that we have no medical purpose of the data. It's all behavioral purpose. And that's also going back to what you were saying, Sydney, like not finding necessarily the why, but the patterns. This kind of data, and I would recommend for the ABA team, allows you to see those patterns, because it is easy to get caught up in like, okay, why, what is the function, which we need to know regardless, but also just knowing the pattern, or knowing, even like I've gotten to know my kids so well that I am better able to identify what could be the why now, obviously after 6 years, than the parent is now, because I know the patterns. I know, well, this happened and then this happened. Like, for example, a weekend where, like I'm saying, like even excited states are a problem, whatever, a weekend where, okay, everyone is home, sisters are home, dad is home, we're going to SeaWorld, we're going to the carousel, we're going to all these fun places. Monday comes, bloody murder. And everyone's like, but he had such a great week. And I'm like, yeah, well, he got such a great weekend with all these people, all of his everything that happened. His brain is fried. There was no time to rest, all of this. And yeah, it comes out of nowhere when you tell him like stand up, and then he's just out of his mind. Like there is we may not know exactly what happened in the moment that I told him to stand up, and we may think it's a demand, but it's not that. It's just literally the 3 days that happened prior to us, or out of nowhere, because lack of sleep is very common for Syngap, and Syngap parents tend to normalize that. I'll come and which is understandable, but you have to also pull it out of them so that you know what you're working with. I'll come and he's very irritable, like just moody. I'm like, what's going on? How was sleep? Oh, he slept great. Everything's great. Okay, well, I keep digging. 3 hours later, it's like, oh yeah, well, he woke up like 5 times last night. I'm like, oh, you said that was great sleep. Yeah, well, that's great sleep for us. Like, that's still not great sleep for anyone. He woke up 5 times. That's not good sleep. That's something to consider. And if he woke up 2 times or he woke up 6 times, there's a difference. And that, matters to us. So definitely I have a big old sheet. I also have it done and formulated, so I can send it to you if you would like. And that's how I've found patterns too of, okay, when you go here, when there's a change in schedule in this regard, or when there is this, or when there is that, it seems like that's a pattern we have to watch. And whenever that situation occurs, then what we do is we go proactive and see how we can help them overcome those situations.
All of this is really good. And I think like I have a couple of ideas of things I want to try with you guys too, that we can chat about just from this. Elemy, one of the other things that I had mentioned to you was kind of the issue of motivation for Emmett. I mean, it's definitely impacted by his seizures, and certainly it took a huge hit when he was going through a medicine change where he wasn't feeling well. It was like anything that he normally liked, he was like, no, thank you. All I want is my iPad or the TV. And that was like the only thing he would reliably like do anything for or show interest in for a while. But even before that happened, I did notice that, you know, as time goes by and he's getting a little bit older, you know, he's kind of moving away from being excited by some of those more like baby kind of things, like board books or bubbles or, you know, musical instruments, stuff that's, you know, for younger kids. But truth be told, it's more appropriate for him as far as what his gross and fine motor skills look like. And yet he's still kind of, you know, aging away from them, or, you know, not being as excited by them. And so I feel like we're in a little bit of a tricky place as far as like finding stuff that actually motivates him and that is reinforcing for him. And I don't know if you have any maybe pointers for us on that.
Yeah, for sure. So I know he's a little one, so that is definitely a little bit different, because I imagine that some of your goals are probably going to be fine motor, gross motor, and all encompassing. For example, for me, mine have been older, like 7 and up, and even teenagers. So we have gotten to the point that we're like straight functional. Like, okay, what are we working on that we're no longer working on those little really developmental milestones that I definitely wouldn't recommend that you don't. Like, I think big part of the problem that has been, not problem, but that has been more challenging for us to teach my kiddos is that so much of their developmental milestones were missed. And it wasn't that we couldn't teach them, it was that they just were not taught. But motivation, they definitely, I have a hypothesis, you guys may laugh, okay, it's okay, that maybe one day we'll discover that Syngap, just like the actual condition, makes them look a lot like less functional than they are, because cognitively, God, some of the things that they do, I'm like, how do you understand remorse, kid? How do you get like the guilt? I'm like, one day we're just gonna find that physiologically and physically, that's what it makes you look like. But all this time you understood exactly what you were doing. So is in regards to him actually growing, my kids' interests like literally change yearly. And granted, I have a teenager, but that's on a typical level, like they change that quickly. But it doesn't surprise me that doesn't interest him anymore. Like, he's actually growing developmentally, even if he's not growing as fast in all of the things that we think that we consider developmentally appropriate, you know. So really, I have not much of a concrete answer, unfortunately, for you guys. I just don't stop trying. When I first started working with my kiddo, the first thing that I was told was like, nothing motivates him. I'm like, oh yeah, challenge accepted, because there is something that actually motivates them. There always is. And it's not only iPad, it's not only TV. We have to look. I seriously have, I'm the most ridiculous person on the planet at all times. And my mom tells me, not my mom, the mom of my kid, tells me that it's like, anyone who like meets you, I seriously will probably get like, I don't know, how are you with her? Or why do you let her do all of this? Because I'm absolutely out of my mind. Like, I will do a personal circus in his house if I have to. I've pulled like their sisters' Barbies. I've pulled hats. I've pulled videos, and I just try and 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 try. I'm constantly looking on a daily, I kid you not, I'm like, fun toys. And one thing that I can tell you concretely is that Syngapians do like cause and effect, like toys or any kind of activity, like push and pop, like Pop the Pirate or things like that, that something happens and boom, surprise, something else happens. Birthday parties, anything exciting. They're very happy kids. So they're not the type to like sit with a puzzle. Maybe yours is, but it doesn't seem like it. Yeah. Sit with a puzzle or the typical put-ins or the typical blow bubbles. Like they're super happy, exciting, outgoing, like we go out on the streets and yell at people and we're like, hey, look at us, we're so and so and blah blah blah. Anything fun, and put your most like outgoing extroverted staff with your Syngap kiddo, because that's what they need. They need action, they need stimulation, they need just like, if you think his brain is going 1,000 miles per hour, a puzzle is not going 1,000 miles per hour. So you need something that can control that, and that's typically like someone who's loud and obnoxious all the time, like this. But yeah, there is definitely ways to find that motivation. Just keep trying, and look for innovative, like more crazy things. And then if iPad and TV are for right now until you find the latter or whatever, then use that. I literally got to the point when I first started working with him and nothing worked for him, I will literally take his iPad and just be to build instructional control and be, touch your nose. Okay, here you go. Fine, touch your nose. Here you go. Like in that regard, very DTT, but that's what helped me break away from that. And eventually he was so motivated because I made it fun and I started introducing like those pairings with my own fun, that he would give me his iPad and then we slowly went away from that. And I know already that there is things that he does like elevators or like all of those other stuff, all of those that seem to be problematic. There's a way, and it's not easy, but turn them around to your advantage. He has those motivations, use them. That's the first thing I would suggest, and that's the first thing I did. And I hope we get to elevators, because that was something really good for you, Sydney.
Oh yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you quickly about the iPad issue, because I'm also, as a parent, still trying to shape my mind around what an iPad means in a family with a child with such a significant disability. Because obviously we know that tons of screen time can take away from actually time that can be used to develop other skills. And if I'm being honest, the iPad for us has also become almost, not quite, but almost as problematic as the elevators, in the sense that when it's time to be done, it's ugly and it's brutal. And I've used it a lot of times the same way I would use it for my neurotypical kids, which is like, I need to work for another hour. Here is the only way that I know how to occupy you for that hour so that you're safe and I can do things. And I'm starting to realize like maybe that can't be how we use it, and we have to use it more for like ABA related purposes and instructional control. But maybe you can help me to understand that a little more, because I definitely, if that's going to be a good motivating thing for him, then that's great. But I feel a little bit like it's a slippery slope where it's like, okay, we're using it to motivate, but taking it away is really hard. And now we just get stuck in the place where like he is only working for the iPad. And like, I hope that makes sense. Maybe you can.
No, it absolutely makes sense. So couple of things on that. First, you're the mom. I know that you're awesome and you want to do everything that you can, and you want to, don't make it your goal to be the therapist, because you can't. You have to be the mom. So don't think that my mom uses the iPad the same way that you do. Like, I need an hour to make some phone calls and whatever. Here's your iPad, kid. And I 100% approve that. I'm like, do it like that. You're the mom. That's what you do. When I go in and I need to take data, I'm not just gonna give him the iPad. That's my job. So don't feel like you have to do that, or like don't feel bad for doing that, and don't feel like you maybe need to save it for ABA or anything like that. Don't change that yet. We're not there. Like only when your team has it down and they're able, and please, if you don't think so, let me know. But only when your team has it down and when they're able to transfer the skills and all of that to you, then that's when we move on, because then your life will become more difficult, and we don't want more difficulty to come to you or to the kid. So there is one. Two,
I'm so glad I asked. That's a huge permission that you just gave me. So you, Melissa, and Erica will just have to remind me.
yes, they need a lot of reminders, or parents do need a lot of reminders. That's another thing. And they're I think that because of the difficulties that they face, they're just very different from all the parents, at least in my experience, that I've had to deal with, because even the hardest conversations, they'll take it. They want you to tell them. So don't be afraid to tell them, to be honest, and to just be like, listen, this is what I see. And ultimately, I always leave it up to them. But 99% of the time, I swear, probably 100% of the time, they're like, okay, you're right, we're in, let's do it, you know? So that's for you guys too. Like, know that you can be complete open. They want the help more than anybody. So you can be honest on that. So back to the iPad, there's a few things on that. I agree. I'm not for screen time. I'm not one to be like, yeah, well, let's use iPad as a motivator. What I'm saying is, let's use iPad as leverage, because the reason why you don't have anything else to give him to do other than his iPad, and even, for example, if TV is an alternative, I would recommend that you guys use TV more than you use iPad, because iPad, when they're like this causes seizures, and it's more likely to be more detrimental than longer distance on the TV. So that's one thing concretely that I can tell you. When you can trade him the iPad for the TV, do it. But the other reason why we can get him to do anything else is because those leisure skills are in there. So one thing to do is we need to work on leisure skills. And what are those? Well, we have to tap into his motivation. What is he willing to do on his own that doesn't require the iPad? I don't have many for my kiddo, but I have some, and I had none. And they don't last a long time, but they last some time. And that's just a little bit of I'm okay with that. You know, we're making progress. From absolutely nothing, literally iPad. First of all, he wouldn't even watch a whole video. He would just scroll on the iPad. And I'm like, no, buddy, like, we got to watch the video. If you're going to watch videos, watch the video. So we first started working on that, and it turns out he liked the videos that he was watching. He just never watched them. So he was just scrolling. So we started there. Out of a sudden, he got all this interest on music, on like freaking Adele and Bruno Mars, and then other interests like Yo Gabba Gabba, and Yo Gabba Gabba actually has great shows that have helped us teach other things like coronavirus and germs and wearing your mask and washing your hands, all of that. He never knew he liked them. So there's that. And then from there, we've been able to pull other things like, okay, now he has his own AirPods. We got him his own AirPods. We connected to our phone, and he listens to music, and he'll do it for 5-10 minutes, something like that. Pictures, loves pictures. What an idea to make him an album. We just made like printed a bunch of pictures that he likes of all of the places that he likes going to, of the people that he loves, whatever. And he'll just sit there with 3 of his big old binder albums, and he'll just like look and calm me, relax. You know, it's a lot of like tapping again into that motivation and what he is willing to entertain himself with. But the reason why he's going to the iPad is because he doesn't have anything else. He doesn't know what else to do. It's kind of like you and I, when you literally have done everything, you've worked out, you're literally in a miracle day that you have done everything that you need to do, and you're just sitting there and you're like, I don't have anything else to do. What am I going to do? It's the same thing. They don't have that. So there is that. We have to probably tap into his leisure. Like, what are we working on for him to be able to entertain himself? And at the beginning, obviously, he's gonna need someone. It's gonna be to need to work done with someone so that we can slowly fade out that support. Behavior in regards to taking the iPad away, that's also something that you'll need support from the behavioral team. That obviously our goal is not to use, again, is not to use the iPad to motivate him, is not to use the iPad to forever be it. Our goal is to use it as leverage to move it away from it and teach him the appropriate replacement skills for those behaviors to go away. That requires a level of like really detailed behavior planning and development and modifications and trial and error. That's where the behavior team would step in, and that's what we did. And that's kind of like along the lines too of how we did the elevator, how we did the escalator, how we did all of those things that were like a source of severe behavior, but also a source of great motivation. How do we twist them around? How do we flip it? Again, that's just planning from the behavior team, and I'm sure with all the behavior strategies, like they'll walk you through, but it's not a simple thing. We have to work on it, and it takes some time and it takes some trial and error. Does that make sense and answer your question?
It totally makes sense. So how about, since you mentioned it, in the last 10 minutes, I want to hear your brilliant elevator ideas. There's no way we can cover the complexities of Emmett's relationships with elevators in 10 minutes, but I'd like some key points for sure.
Well, it's honestly really, it's not that brilliant. It's just the same. What I wanted to tell you, Sydney, personally, from the email that you sent me last, is that the mom of my kiddo told me the exact same thing you told me. The exact same thing. Is just, it will never get him away from it, and it's just a problem, and I'm worried about this, and it's a behavior and all that. The thing about behavior and the way that we can help you is that you need to allow us to help us the way we know how to do it. And this goes for both that I wanted to talk about your therapy room too. We need to create positive experiences along what we want the behavior to be extinguished, decreased, or eliminated in order for us to be able to help the behavior decrease. We have no luck, no game in the game if we do not have a positive relationship with the kid and a positive experience with the kid. If all he has is negative experiences with the elevator, what should you expect? A negative experience. But if you create a positive experience with the elevator, this was like so outrageous. And I remember for my kiddo's mom, she was like, "You're out of your mind. I'm not taking him to the escalator. We'll never get out of there." Everyone will get tired of something they like at some point. I was like, "I promise you, I'll stay with you 8 hours. I don't care." But he will get tired. And once he gets tired and he engages in the appropriate behavior, leaving the elevator when you're asking him to do, your game, even if it takes you 8 hours. But personally, is the only way that I know how I've experienced it. And what I've done is, okay, you want the escalator, I'm going to give you all the escalator that you want, but there's only one requirement, obviously, that instructions are followed and that obviously the replacement behavior exists. If you remove the situation in which he has to engage in the behavior because he doesn't get access to it, then the behavior shouldn't occur at all, because he's getting access to it all he wants. Let him push the buttons, let him break the elevator. Who cares? That behavior will be immediately eliminated, which is what we want. We want to engage in the behavior without the maladaptive one. And so eventually he'll just be like, okay, cool. Or you have his iPad, and if his iPad is equally as motivating, then you'd be like, okay, it won't last 8 hours, I promise you. But hypothetically speaking, it does. You're like, okay, you ready? You want your iPad? Okay, let's go. Cool. He sits in his stroller, he goes away, he engaged in the right behavior. That's all you need. And then you do it constant enough where he knows, think about it, like imagine you being deprived of the one thing that you love all the time. What will you do? Hit and scream and cry and throw yourself on the ground until you get access to it. So that is what's happening. They're being deprived to the one thing they love the most. So why deprive them instead of satiating them, giving them what they want, and teaching them the correct response? Let's teach him that he will come back. You don't know, and this is something that I tell my parents all the time, you don't know what's going on in his head. You don't know if he does remember, but hypothetically speaking, in that moment, you don't know if he remembers that he'll come back. You don't know if to him it'll be gone forever. You don't know if it means like it's like death of a loved one. Like you don't know what that means, to him emotionally. So what we want to teach him is that it will come back. We will give you what you want. We promise you. Trust us. We'll give you what you want, but you have to follow the flow. You have to follow our instruction. You have to follow all of that. So that is my not so brilliant idea. It's just very basic. You just have to be willing to deal with it and be willing to, the day that you go to therapy, you have your team, you have your BCBA there, and let's do it, guys. Let's start this. And I kid you not, they're such quick learners. It won't even take you like a week, 2 weeks. It won't be like a crazy thing. It's quicker than you think. But it is because we're doing it the opposite way that is just not working for us. Same with your therapy room. I know that you mentioned why he's not allowed to go in the house, and sometimes you're working and all of that. Unfortunately, the only thing I have for you is you have to make that therapy room a positive place. The more you restrict him, the more he's going to want to get out, especially if it's not a positive place. So what I would do is keep the gate open, allow him access to all of those things. And again, out of these two things and everything else that comes in regards to that, what you guys want to do is create positive experiences first so that you can actually teach him what you want. He's not in a state in which he can learn when he hates the place that he's in. He's constantly thinking about wanting to get out, and he's not stimulated in a way that he can learn. He's not getting anything out of those sessions if he's constantly in that place. We want to first want him to be happy, want him to not be restricted, want him to come around, and then maybe we put the iPad in the room. We put all of the good things in the room, and then we get him to come around. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And Melissa, I'm not sure if you know exactly what Elemy's talking about, because obviously you haven't been here, but we have like a room with more toys than one child should have. That we've really carved out a big space for Emmett, and he is not excited to be in there. And anytime you try to get him to go in there, he is really upset about it. And so I was just asking Elemy, and I've talked with his ABAT about this as well, like how do we encourage him to enjoy time in there, more than he is, so that there's a safe place to put him when we need. He can have good sessions and everything, but obviously he also needs access to other parts of the house and things that are in the house as well. So that's what she was chatting about.
Yeah. I also, if you have a lot of toys though, I would recommend taking some of those away, like putting them away.
Yeah, we have actually been paring things down. And I've also been thinking too that, maybe he needs some new things, but he also needs more cause and effect kind of stuff as well, or sensory things, which I think are the two things that he would enjoy the most and get the most reward from. Yeah.
Yep. So there is that.
Cool. All right. So I don't want to take too much more of your time, Elemy. I really appreciate you sharing this stuff with me. And I think for Melissa and Erica, this is really informative, like such a great way to start their working relationship with Emmett, because he is complicated and everything's really complex. So I do really appreciate your time. And I'm definitely I'm sure my team and I will talk together about some of the ideas you've given us, and I'll give you some feedback and let you know like what worked and how quickly it worked and all that kind of stuff too.
Yes, perfect. And if you have any other questions, if you want to share my email with your team, I'm happy to answer any other questions. If you guys hit a roadblock, please reach out. I'm happy to help. I want these families to achieve success and all that. So I'm happy to help in any other way I can. Just let me know.
That's awesome. Thanks, Melissa, to you too for making time to be here. Hey.
Yeah.